Hey everyone, this is Charlie Shrem, and you're listening to Untold Stories. This is a show where we dive deep into the lives and personal histories of some of crypto's most influential leaders and find out how the crypto movement truly came to be. Let's dive in. If I asked you what industry had civil war, has crazy opinions, trolling, personal attacks, but also is an amazing open source community and has built the infrastructure that we are using and will use for the rest of our lives and for the history of the world. Do you think I'm talking about the Bitcoin industry? Actually, no. I'm talking about the early days of the internet in the 90s. I'm talking about people who were the first proponents and inventors of building out open source communities, but also making sure that they are viable business models in the future. My guest today, Dr. Marc Fleury, is one of those people who actually was one of the inventors and conceptualizers of open source software as a business model. It was really cool because I didn't realize how actually brilliant he was until we started talking. We talked about how he built the first application layer, JBoss, on top of the internet, and his first two customers were the Mormons and the porn companies. Sounds very similar to Bitcoin, doesn't it? The people that need to use a technology the most are the ones that are disenfranchised with existing technologies. I really don't want to ruin the rest of the episode for you. We talked about like quantum mining and some of the benefits and why he thinks the ICO world needs to actually come back. We debated proof of work versus proof of stake, and he was really able to open up my mind to a lot of these things. Enjoy the show. Have a great listen, grab a coffee or whatever your favorite beverage is. I promise you this is definitely one of my best episodes. Talk to you guys soon. How do you actually live your life on crypto? How do you do it? I've been doing it since I first got started with Bitcoin back in, 2011. But since 2016, I've been using the BitPay debit card to spend my Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis. And it's been such a great product that I've been using it for over 3 years. BitPay is now sponsoring Untold Stories, and they're going to be giving away free Visa debit cards to all my listeners. All you have to do is visit bitpay.com/Charlie. It's such an easy card to use. You get the card in the mail, you download the BitPay app, you put Bitcoin on the app, and when you want to send Bitcoin from the app into your debit card, it only takes a few seconds and you can spend your Bitcoin anywhere credit cards are offered. It's really so easy. You almost wonder, why didn't this come out in 2011 when Bitcoin first launched? Well, it was very difficult to do. In fact, I actually tried to launch my own debit card, but I wasn't able to because the credit card companies were very reluctant to do it. But now BitPay launched their product, and a lot of other companies have launched credit cards and debit cards using Bitcoin over the years. I still will only use the BitPay card. I'm very loyal to the brands I like, and I hope you guys are too. The fees are very low. You can use it to withdraw cash at ATMs. You can use it all around the world with very, very low fees. A lot of companies have tacked on super high fees, and I don't like that. So check it out, bitpay.com/Charlie. That's bitpay.com/Charlie. You get a free card. You don't have to pay for it. Usually the card costs $10 or more. There's a commitment, but you don't have to do that here. It's a free card. There's literally no reason to not try it out. I've been using it for over 3 years. So check it out. Over the years, a lot of companies have tried doing crypto social networking. But the problem is that there are a lot of really good social networking apps already out there, like Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat. How do we build a social network that's perfect for crypto? Well, I want to talk about Pepo. Pepo is an amazing social media app that's built for the crypto community. What's really cool about it is that you can get rewarded for uploading and putting out good content, and you can also reward with crypto people who put up content that you really, really like. It's fast and simple, and it's the first crypto-powered app to be approved by the Apple and Google App Stores. You can find me on Pepo right now at Charlie Shrem, the same handle as my Twitter, and I'm going to be posting interviews, travel videos, and more. So make sure you check out Pepo. It's super cool. Pepo.com. Enjoy it. Untold Stories wouldn't be here without the amazing production company Blockworks Group. A few months ago, I approached Blockworks Group and I said, hey guys, I want to do a show, Untold Stories. Can we make it happen? And these guys are the only event and podcast production company that I trust. Really, this show is powered by them, and it wouldn't be here today without the amazing work of the Blockworks Group team. So for access to all the premier digital asset conferences and to check out their other podcasts in their network that they produce, check them out at blockworksgroup.io. That's blockworksgroup.io. I promise you will not be disappointed. At this point, you've been listening to the show. We've had 50 some odd episodes, and you're starting to get a feel of, the course of the show, why I started it, and the type of guests that I have. I also use the show to teach myself new lessons and to talk to people who were involved in different industries that draw some really nice parallels to our industry. Because, one of my mottos, as you guys know, is you really need to understand where you came from to know where you're going. Today, I'm very pleased to have on the show Dr. Marc Fleury. Marc, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome, and hello.
What was interesting to me when I started doing the research for this show is that you were involved in open source software for a very, very, very long time. And in fact, you were one of the first people in the 90s to actually figure out a way to commercialize and, actually earn profit on open source software. When most people think that open source software is always related to like nonprofit work, and usually when there's like no profit model. And, I'm actually guilty of that. So this is me here learning how I'm wrong. Can you explain to me and tell us why, going back then, you thought using open source when you're building the early infrastructure of the internet in the 90s, why were you such a proponent of open source, that model of having everyone to collaborate together and that, kind of development governance system? Why did you decide to do that? And why were you such a fervent proponent of it?
I actually got a PhD in theoretical physics from the French École Polytechnique, but did my work in the research lab of electronics at MIT in the mid-90s. And in the mail room that we had back then on Unix Station, there was Tim Berners-Lee and the early team of the HTTP protocol. And all I remember was the energy and enthusiasm that these guys had about what they were doing while I was slaving away in a lab and doing exotic mirror mathematical calculations. And when I finished my PhD, I knew I wanted to leave academia and go to software. And part of their energy was because they were doing all of this in open source. They were collaborating with developers all over the world back then. And to me, that was a very exciting world. I could feel the energy. All I know was I wanted to be part of it. So when I got into software in the mid-90s, the internet was just starting, and these guys had just tremendous energy. Open source was a new thing. And that's it. All I knew was I wanted to be a part of it. And the same thing is going on with crypto. I can feel this energy.
In the early days of Bitcoin, like from 2009 to 2000 and like, I don't know, I would even go to say like to 2012, 2013, the development community, the developer community, the business community, and the user, holder, and miner community were extremely, very close with a lot of respect at the same time, because it was realized very early on that it's a very small pie and we have to work together to grow that pie. And so there were really no like businesses to make money. Let me rephrase that. The businesses and the products that launched back then were businesses and products launched by people, myself included, who needed these products. So these were services. BitPay built their service. They built their company because the CEO needed that service. He felt that was needed for our industry and for himself. I built BitInstant because simply there was no way to buy Bitcoin back then. So I wanted to buy Bitcoin. So I built a business to do that. All the exchanges, you look at Mt. Gox, Bittrex, every company back then was the same. And so my question to you is, do you see similar parallels to the early days of the internet and the open source community as you did with the early days of Bitcoin, whereas people building out the infrastructure and the products were more building it out for themselves as opposed to like the industry on a whole?
Yes, there's a mantra in open source that says, scratch your own itch. And basically, it says that most people join open source efforts and start developing because they have a specific need for the software. They will use it, start developing, debug, and contribute back to the community. So the scratch your itch approach basically describes what you just said. If you're going to join a specific community and you feel that this or that is missing, instead of talking about it, why don't you go ahead and do it, because the barriers to entry have been removed. That's definitely something, as a matter of fact, that attracted me to Bitcoin in the early days. I discovered Bitcoin through friends in the music industry that were using it to settle certain transactions, quote unquote. And they said, look, this is open source money. You understand open source, you understand money. Why don't you take a look at it? And as you know, open source was an integral part of the original Bitcoin movement and the Satoshi white paper.
What do you mean by that?
Well, what's so interesting about Bitcoin and open source ledger in general, and I think we've lost sight of that a little bit.
I agree, but I don't want to digress you.
Is that there is no government, there is no corporation. It's an open source effort. In practice, it's been concentrated on miners, developers, and whales. But in theory, we have the promise of a peer-to-peer open source money, open source currency.
How do you feel about some of the people in our space that are creating a new push for more people to get involved in Bitcoin core development? And what I mean by that is not just developing or writing code, but also simple things like translating the white paper or commenting on the code or kind of like maintenance things or just anything you can be involved in development without being a developer, spell checking, the comments or just simple things. Now, I know a lot of developers think that's futile and they want to keep core development to themselves and they want to be like the maintainers or the holders or the custodians of that. But there's a growing movement, not online. I don't see it anywhere online. It's people that I speak to. There's a growing movement of people that want to encourage more people to be involved in the Bitcoin development process at a core, protocol level. And that's because they feel like the more people that are involved, the better off our open source system is. And because you mentioned governance, very important. And there is a lack of governance, but I think that's a good thing. But I'm going to let you respond first.
I was talking about governments. Apologies for my crappy French accent.
Still a good question, though, I have.
For sure. No governments, no companies. And so what is so attractive about open source DLTs is that nobody controls them. And I think today, you have, whether it be in the stablecoin category, Libra, or the Bank of China, those are two, I don't want to call them perverted because they are actually very positive contribution to the ecosystem, but certainly not open source in the spirit of the original Satoshi paper. But to answer your question, I think the more the merrier. It's the stone soup myth approach, meaning, if we all got together and contribute bits and pieces, eventually you arrive at something quite magical through sheer size. And when I started JBoss in the late 90s, we had Linux, we had Apache, and we had people who could not write code but were so excited to participate, they would translate the documentation. I personally annotated the software given to us by an alien by the name of Rickard, literally. He claimed to be an alien.
Really?
So,
what do you mean?
Well, just that. I mean, there's always a lore of aliens, and this particular head software developer that worked for me said, I'm an alien, and the reason I work for you and not IBM or Oracle, because he was very in demand, he was one of the best developers up there, is that my military command structure, he was a military alien, thinks that Earth is under psychic attack, and the only way we're going to develop the communication infrastructure is if we create the open source internet, and the internet in open source, outside of the control of any corporation or any government. It's a true story. I mean, it's a crazy story, but it's a true story. And it's come to pass today. I mean, the internet and open source have a symbiotic chicken and egg relationship. But back to your question, I think bringing people in for translating, documentation. I think in the case of Bitcoin, a lot of evangelization and paid for evangelization, or rather paid in evangelization. I remember exchanging very early on, for me, 2011, with Gavin Andreessen of Bitcoin development team. Some say he's the real Satoshi, but we all know that's Craig. This is a matter of...
Are you being sarcastic in that?
No, of course.
Oh, because you sound... You got me there.
All right. all of this is a matter of public record. It's on my blog. I can send you the link after, and you'll see the exchange with Gavin. Anyway, I don't want to inflate my contribution to the early Bitcoin beyond what it is.
What was your early contribution to Bitcoin?
Not much, just an exchange with. It's online. You can go and read it. Basically, somebody pointed out the paper. I read it in detail, and it made a lot of sense. And I called very early many trends, such as, look, this is not a money. This is going to be a volatile store of value. I actually called a multi-layer marketing approach to it, and why the early adopters were such enthusiastic proponents and exponents of the technology. It was because they had Bitcoins. They had mined Bitcoins. And mind you, when I got in was when Bitcoin just blew to $20 a token back then, which was, oh my God, this token went times 10 in the year, and I called that was never going to be a money just because of intrinsic properties. I spend a lot of time doing research and reading and educating myself through the financial crisis. So I knew enough monetary theory to analyze Bitcoin from that standpoint. And
what did Gavin say to you? Like, what did he think?
He said, look, Satoshi wants us to be an open source effort. What does that mean to you, Mark? And I said, I was very practical. I said, well, look, I invented a model whereby my open source developer were compensated. And that's what was important to me, that these free software developers that came because they were passionate about software and not focused on the money. I'm passionate that they do get a reward out of their efforts. And that came to pass. And I told him, are your developers compensated? And he said, well, look, everybody's sitting on a stash of Bitcoin that they've mined already. And so I said, well, we're done. That's it.
Do you know what's interesting? Gavin, do you know what year that was? It was like 2011 or 2010?
2011, yeah.
So do you want to hear something funny? I was in Vienna with Gavin a few months after you had this correspondence. And I was already running BitInstant, and I was in Vienna with like a bunch of other Bitcoiners, and this was still very early, 2011 or whatever, end of 2011. And a lot of the industry people in the space were looking for a way to like kind of get together and work together for advertising or messaging or whatever, and to start like an industry association. And when I spoke to Gavin about it in Vienna, about my idea, he said to me, sounds great. I will support you on this, and I will join you with this. And obviously, if Gavin joins you, then it's going to happen, because he was like the de facto leader at the time. Not that we needed a leader, but it is what it is, like more spiritual leader. But you know what he said? He said, I will join on the condition that I get paid as a core developer. Very interesting parallel to the conversation that you had.
Did he use the word core developers?
So the word core developer wasn't used, but
Okay.
I can't tell you if it was or it wasn't, but I'm not going to tell you it was if I can't 1,000% guarantee. But he said myself and other developers on Bitcoin or something like that. And he wasn't the only developer that eventually, so we ended up starting the foundation, and Gavin did get paid as like a chief scientist, and we did start paying other developers. Now, it's not what I wanted the foundation to be, actually. And so I ended up, I led my term out. I was a founding director and I was the first vice chairman, but I led my term out and I never, came back because that's not what I wanted the foundation to be. What he wanted the foundation to be was more of like a MIT Media Lab or like, a think tank or one of these nonprofits that basically pay for like, developers to work on open source software. And it's not a bad thing, but it's not really what I knew how to do. I'm this kid from Brooklyn who's just running a business, So what was your next? I mean, a lot of people that I met in the early days of Bitcoin, a lot of people that I met, yourself included, ended up like hearing about it, communicating with certain people, and then kind of left to do something else, and then came back for a bunch of reasons. Did you know most people in the space actually heard about Bitcoin, left, and then came back when they heard about it a second time, myself included? What happened after you'd spoken to Gavin? Did you do something else? Did you come back?
So, like you, I heard about it, wrote a blog, analyzed it in depth, never understood the nonsense. We can come back to that. I call it the nonsense of the nonsense. And went back to actually running my own private money in the public markets and running hedge fund strategy. I came back around 2013, 2014, when I saw my kids and the whole mining movement and how they got into it and that era of Mt. Gox. And Mt. Gox was a big event in my mind, that the hack and all the noise around it. And more interestingly is the fact that it didn't die at Mt. Gox that I found fascinating.
Isn't that so interesting?
Yeah, for sure. There's a bad analogy about open source is that it's like pee in the pool. You can put it in, but you can never take it out. And I thought, I didn't think anything, actually. I took it seriously. I mean, Bitcoin, I knew the potential as an investment specifically. But I was really pleasantly surprised by the resilience that it showed. And I think part of it has to do with the motivation of the early adopters and how the proselytism around the early Bitcoin crowd. But it certainly showed a lot of resilience.
That's a good point. So like, the people that were like the early ideology, anarcho-capitalists, people that were like just here to proselytize Bitcoin and to just out of like pure love, like spread the gospel, like the evangelicals or the missionaries, or I don't know what a good parallel to say. But on the topic of parallels, like did the early days of the internet have that? Did early days of open source, like people working on things like Java, like was that a thing? Were there like evangelists for that?
Certainly.
Really? Okay.
Well, so the birth of the open source movement is actually all the way back to Bill Gates and Richard Stallman. I don't know if you're familiar with that history of.
I'm familiar with the story only because I saw a movie about it, and I don't remember which one, but it involved Bill Gates.
Pirates of Silicon Valley.
Could have been, yeah. So
something like that.
Linus Torvald was in the movie too. There was a bunch of different people that were involved in early days of the internet. But there's so little that we know about what went on back then. Someone needs to do like an Untold Stories of the early days of the internet. You should do that.
That's not a bad idea. Essentially, Bill Gates was saying, look, we need to pay the developers, and so I'm going to make the licenses for pay. And Richard Stallman, both were in Cambridge. Stallman was the head of AI at MIT back when AI was nothing. And he said, it took a philosophical stance that we needed free software for free men. And so it was this very intense philosophical debate between the two. And both came to fame, at least, if not fortune, because Stallman never really made a fortune out of free software, even though he became a giant of the movement. But the early days were fueled by the passion of the free software developers. And just like Bitcoin, it had sort of I don't want to say a bad reputation, but to many business software people, the free software guys were these radical, rabid evangelists in Birkenstock talking nonsense about the future of mankind and free software running free men, basically. And I think the same thing is going on today with Bitcoin and open source ledgers in general, that, crypto has become this dirty word because of some of the past history and because of some of the dark web origins.
I completely agree, and I'm definitely somewhat to blame. Part of the reason I do the show is to almost like redeem myself because of the guilt that I feel for the negative reputation that I may have caused. A lot of people told me that I haven't, but it's kind of how I feel. But don't you think that negative reputation of Bitcoin and blockchain has kind of went away for nefarious activities, or do mainstream people that aren't involved in our space still associate Bitcoin and crypto with nefarious activities? And it's a good question because I'm living in the bubble. I'm in the crypto bubble. So it's hard for me to see on the outside. So, tell me what you think. Is that still a problem that we have?
I think it's the main problem that we have today in terms of where the industry is at. And if you analyze where we're at what Gartner calls the trough of disillusionment after the peak of expectations.
Okay.
And it's perhaps not just the fact that there were dark web activity. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. As a matter of fact, it was framed from the music business, and nobody makes money in the underground music business. They make money dealing drugs.
Yeah, it's good to study these things and debate whether they were good or bad for the space. And a lot of people,
they were great for the space.
Yes.
It's super important. And you can't take it away from the internet. The internet has always been this dualistic beast. As this Broadway show likes to remind everybody, the internet is for porn. And this is not a joke, but my first customers at JBoss were both the Church of Latter-day Saints, because they wanted this open source software for generational soul redeeming, and Playboy, because they were at the forefront of porn. But let's not get sidetracked too much. There's obviously dark web cash flows. There's obviously speculative cash flows. I don't think that's what's holding back. I think it's there is a dirty reputation, but I think what's holding off is a lot of people's actually psychological, the opposite of FOMO. If you think about what's going on, a lot of people actually missed out on the past wave.
Yes, they did.
And there's a lot of, there's maybe tens of thousands of people in the real core, the core developers or the core Bitcoiners.
I love how you're theorizing FOMO. I love that. That's great.
It's the opposite that's going on right now, right?
Do you have a term for it?
I don't know. You tell me. You and David Waxman need to come up with a problem. But you know what I'm talking about, right? They're justifying. Yeah. You tell them you missed out, and you know what? They feel redeemed because look at us now. We're running on fumes of liquidity, and they're sitting on the sidelines with the new product we're marketing. I see that a lot. You have a lot of people, institutional money, that feel very self-satisfied and smug, but still they have this intrinsic FOMO for the next wave. And I think it's there's a lot of, in this industry, we, like you said, we're in a bubble, and the people outside see that it's a bubble. And I'm a big fan of Nouriel Roubini, the NYU professor. And I think we're not giving him the right treatment, but he's calling out the bubble. And I think we need to clear that psychological hurdle, but everything is set up so that we actually do. And the next wave is going to have a lot more people. It's not the dirty reputation. That's what they say. It's their own self-justification that they've missed the past wave.
What type of experiences can we learn from? And then I want to move on to JBoss and then quantum mining and then talk about your new project 2 Prime. But one of the last questions I have on this topic was, they're kind of like three. There was the crypto civil war. Or I don't like to call it that, but it was what it was. And then you have today you have a lot of tribalism, you have trolling, and then you have personal attacking. And it almost prevents theorizing that you and I are having. It prevents this, right? It prevents people on opposite sides to compromise and come up with good solutions. And what ends up happening is we have, you probably seen this with open sources. You come up with lazier, easier, and faster solutions as opposed to more difficult, more time consuming, and a little bit more contentious solutions to technical problems. So that's my fear, that we'll have more lazy solutions. Did you ever feel that? Did you ever feel that in the 90s with open source software? Did you ever feel that people maybe taking the easier way out because they don't want to simply fight with other ones?
Well, as soon as you put two people in a room, you will have a civil war. I think that's just the nature of
especially
people.
If they like Bitcoin.
And I was going to say, add the concept of money on top of two people in a room, and by definition. In fact, the first thing that really surprised me and in a way impressed me when I came back to cryptocurrencies in 2016, many of my employees were ex-employees at JBoss, were running ICOs, was the ease of forking. Back in the 90s, we had bickering, we had fighting, developers are prima donnas, and everybody has their ego. Even JBoss experienced splintering and hard forking and things like that. But because money sort of supercharges the emotions and the psychologies of everybody, it really impressed me going to websites and on the front page, finding links to say, here's how to fork us. And I thought that was very interesting. It meant here's an atomization of the efforts. And to your point, I think having these infinite threads of mini projects is fine, but there's a strength in number, perhaps. And so, I'm not, I don't want to theorize too much on the psychology of money and people, but definitely.
Although theorizing is a lot of fun.
This infinite forking phenomenon is interesting.
Oh, and you're killing me here because I wanted to move on, but now I have another question. I had a guest yesterday who said that hard forks should never be done unless for emergencies. Unless we have an impending death of the Bitcoin network, hard forks can always be the last option. And even if you have a something like bigger blocks, which honestly should never have been contentious in the first place, and there are gonna be a lot more contentious debates about the future of the technology behind Bitcoin. But he thinks that the fact that we did not hard fork for that set a very, very good precedent, and that we should be focusing on building solutions that don't require that. I kind of agreed when I was listening, but now after listening to you, my opinion may be going back to the center. What's your comment on that?
Well, first of all, I don't really know because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the tech and the Bitcoin space. I'm more focused on the financial applications personally. But if I think back to the open source days, again, I'm surprised by the facility and the speed at which we seem to be forking. I think part of it may be motivated by easy disagreement, fast disagreement, where people want to just fork off, and pun intended. And some of it may be driven by greed, or I'm going to do my own chain, etc., without further justification than, hey, here's my project. And so I think in this instance, because we have given the people the power to do so, we have to sit back and observe. Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know. It is a thing. There seems to be a splintering of efforts. I tend to agree from my past that only hard fork in case of emergency or strong schism within the schools of thought. But it doesn't seem to be the case here, and I think people treat it a lot more lightly, which may not be a bad thing. I honestly do not know, John.
How do you actually live your life on crypto? How do you do it? I've been doing it since I first got started with Bitcoin back in 2011. But since 2016, I've been using the BitPay debit card to spend my Bitcoin on a day-to-day basis. And it's been such a great product that I've been using it for over 3 years. BitPay is now sponsoring Untold Stories, and they're going to be giving away free Visa debit cards to all my listeners. All you have to do is visit bitpay.com/Charlie. It's such an easy card to use. You get the card in the mail, you download the BitPay app, you put Bitcoin on the app, and when you want to send Bitcoin from the app into your debit card, it only takes a few seconds and you can spend your Bitcoin anywhere credit cards are offered. It's really so easy. You almost wonder, why didn't this come out in 2011 when Bitcoin first launched? Well, it was very difficult to do. In fact, I actually tried to launch my own debit card, but I wasn't able to, because the credit card companies were very reluctant to do it. But now BitPay launched their product, and a lot of other companies have launched credit cards and debit cards using Bitcoin over the years. I still will only use the BitPay card. I'm very loyal to the brands I like, and I hope you guys are too. The fees are very low. You can use it to withdraw cash at ATMs. You can use it all around the world with very, very low fees. A lot of companies have tacked on super high fees, and I don't like that. So check it out, bitpay.com/Charlie. That's bitpay.com/Charlie. You get a free card. You don't have to pay for it. Usually the card costs $10 or more. There's a commitment, but you don't have to do that here. It's a free card. There's literally no reason to not try it out. I've been using it for over 3 years. So check it out, and thanks for listening to Untold Stories. Over the years, I've learned a lot from crypto winters, a lot of the bull and bear markets, and there's a lot of things that I've learned. But one of the most important things that I've learned is that community is one of our strongest assets. It allows us to continue working together and talking to each other during the good times, the bad times, and hopefully not the ugly times. Over the past few months, I've been speaking with the Peppo team. These guys have spent years working with members of the crypto community and learning what we want in social sharing apps. And I'm really excited that Peppo is now one of the sponsors for Untold Stories. Even in the few weeks since they launched Peppo at DevCon, not that long ago, I've seen them make so many improvements, like hashtag search based on feedback from people using the app, and so many different features that combine the best parts of what we already love, that parts of Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, but it combines it in a perfect way with such a nice user experience and good security. It combines them so perfectly that it looks like, and it actually was built for the crypto community. You can download the app by going to peppo.com/stories, and you can find me there at Charlie Shrem, the same as my Twitter handle. What was JBoss, for those who don't understand? It was an application server, but what were people using before that? And how did that fundamentally change? Why was it so important that your first two clients were ones who it seemed like needed it the most? So the first two, let me rephrase. So the early adopters of any new technology are the ones that need it the most, right? The ones that are not served well in the other, whatever other solution there is. Case in point, Silk Road and Bitcoin, people using Bitcoin for nefarious things, because these are industries or people that are disenfranchised or kicked out of the legacy financial system. So using the parallel for JBoss, you had the porn industry and the Mormons using it, one of your first clients. Why? What was it, and why was it so important?
Well, like you said, it's always invention is the daughter of necessity, or necessity
I
is the
love
mother
that
of
quote.
invention. Yeah, and I think that's very true.
Can you repeat it one more time for the listeners? I'm sorry.
Sure, and I have to look it up, but I think necessity is the mother of invention, which is a very survivalist approach, meaning if you're going to bring a technology to market, and if it's revolutionary in certain aspects, then those who need it the most are going to want to help you very early on. And in my case, it was the Mormons coming to my training and basically just throwing money at me. Little bit on my scale, I gave training, and for me that was 30 grand, 40 grand for a training, which was a lot of money back then for me. And but just the willingness, not just out of the heart, but there is a cooperation, a symbiosis, and open source sort of facilitates that. Back to the first part of your question as to what JBoss was, it's what today, compared to what today is called layer 2. In fact, in the Bitcoin or blockchain ecosystem, or how do you scale these networks? I compare the state of cryptocurrencies today to the mid or late 90s in the internet infrastructure game.
Late 90s, okay.
Yeah, what was happening is you had a lot of corporations coming with their proprietary APIs for middleware or how to scale databases to the web. And everybody was peddling their standards and please use my network, use my network. Oh, interesting. And it took I remember vividly sitting at Sun Microsystem with the guys who were inventing the early Java, which was called the Green Project, and Little Green Men again. And they were saying, look, if everybody's peddling their own little project, we will never achieve critical mass of the internet. The only way, this is the way, to quote the Mandalorians, is we all get around the table, we all put our petty differences aside, and we agree on a standard that no one owns. It's got to be open source. Because if it's the problem with standards is everybody's okay with them as long as you use their standard. Meaning, Roger Ver is okay with blockchain as long as you use his blockchain.
Yeah, and same with all the other blockchains. They're happy with it, but they own those chains. They own the software.
Correct.
Even if they're open source, they're still not like commercially used. There's still a lot of like knickknacks,
That's right. It's not the open source nature of the code; it's the open source nature of the collaboration. And it's a game theoretical point. If you own the thing and you want to put a rent-seeking mechanism on top of the internet, it's not going to work. And so everybody's got to get around the table. Open source is almost a prerequisite, but it's open collaboration. And that was a trick that Sun Microsystem pulled by standardizing the layer 2 of the internet protocols on top of TCP/IP, how to scale HTTP, how to put the web pages, and that's where JBoss played. We were one of the actors. Yeah.
Before you continue, this may be like a very dumbed down question, but did we go the right path? Pushing towards a multi-layered protocol instead of like bigger blocks and just having everything on the main chain. With Lightning and things like that, is that the correct future for us in terms of looking at it from a software perspective, or of Bitcoin will be as big as the internet, therefore we need to make sure that we have the ability to reach critical mass? Is it technologically speaking, because I'm not a developer, I'm not a very good one actually, but is that the right way forward? And it may not be a black and white answer, but I'm curious because frankly, you know what you're talking about.
I wrote some of the standards of the middleware layers back in my days. And let me tell you this, and it's a bit of a controversial point of view in the blockchain Bitcoin ecosystem. I don't think it's about tech at all. I think we decided to call the most secure, distributed, and slow database in the world money, and to paraphrase Antonopoulos, and everybody lost their minds. But a lot of my ex-employees are today running the cloud. We know what it takes to scale these systems. And it's a combination of low-level protocol and a lot of IT savoir-faire. And actually, I don't dive too much into the tech of blockchain because, to me, intellectually and even financially, I don't invest in the tech. To me, this is not about the tech. And I think the industry maybe has lost sight a little bit of its initial mission, which was about finance, which was about open source money, which was about transnational money and stores of value, and has maybe gotten lost a little bit in the weeds with with the whole tech talk.
What do you mean by that? The whole tech talk?
Well, when I went to CFC, the Crypto Finance Conference, and maybe it's a self-selected crowd because the title Finance says it all.
Sure.
It's clear that if you look at what works, it's been 10 years in the blockchain ecosystem, yeah?
I know.
Since the Satoshi white paper. And 5 years in earnest with the smart contract stuff. Name a dApp that you use every day, like at the level of mail or Facebook or whatever. Name one.
Nothing. All smart contracts and dApps are still gimmicky. They're cool, they're novelty, and you move forward. They're not.
It's cool, it's novelty, and we need to move forward.
So you talk about three different things that where crypto has succeeded. You talk about three different metrics in your quotes online. Can you talk about some of them? Like where have we succeeded so far? I know a store value is one of them.
So definitely, let's look at the killer apps. The killer apps, our thesis that the killer apps are here. They're hiding in plain sight. In fact, they're not even hiding.
I love this.
They're all financial and they're all exchange centric. They are transnational store value, Bitcoin and Ethereum. They are crowdfunding. Let's bring back the ICO. The phenomenon of the ICO is partially what caused the boom of 2017.
Sure, all that rapid fund formation.
Rapid capital formation, rapid fund formation. The problem was capital allocation. We misapplied the funds to tech no one needs, parties on boats and conferences.
You're so right.
Capital formation was phenomenal. It's a killer app of crypto. We need to bring that back and apply it to the real economy. That's what we call accretive tokens. Third killer app hiding in plain sight is the stable coins. Asset-backed coins. The Libra is the Bank of China. Those are all financial. Those are what we need to focus, on going on if we want to make it out of the trough of disillusionment, instead of fighting over the hash rates and the little bit of protocol here and there to scale something that maybe we don't really need this to scale. We just need to find the killer apps and double down on them. That's our thesis.
When I moved here to Florida a few years ago, I met a friend. I met someone who we became really close friends, and he was very interested. He's a retired, he sold one of his companies to E-Trade, retired basically financial analyst, software analyst who wrote, very successful. And he plays golf all day. But during the 2017 ICO bubble, he said, Charlie, I'm interested. I own some Bitcoin, some Ether, some Litecoin. I'm interested in potentially investing, buying some of these tokens or ICOs. Will you, introduce me to some of the people behind the companies? And I said, absolutely. You know how many he actually invested in? 0. Do you know why? Because whenever he'd get to the question, it'd be the same question. And whenever he'd get to that question, the answer was always bad. And therefore, he never bought any tokens. The question was this: how will you manage your money? So basically, once you raise your $50 million, what's next? Who's your accountant? Who's your CFO? What's your business plan? How are you hedging against the crypto market downturn that will come? All these questions, how will you prevent graft, embezzlement? How will you prevent gluttony? Gluttony, I think, gluttony is what brought down the downfall of, like the ICO bubble and everything. Like you said, because people just wasted money on stupid things. You're launching a new company called 2 Prime. You just announced it a few days ago. And you take the best parts of Bitcoin, the things that we succeeded with, and you also take the worst parts of the ICO bubble. You make them better. You combine it all together to launch your new project. So when I was doing the research, it was super intriguing and interesting because you were very honest with what was good and what was bad. So without me, telling the listeners about it, can you tell us what 2 Prime is? Some of the good things you took and some of the bad things you took and made them better.
Sure. So again, the killer apps of crypto are transnational store value, meaning something that exists with a price set through supply and demand. capital formation and crowdfunding. The future of crowdfunding will exist in these crypto exchanges, and we want to see that future come to pass. And third bit, an asset backing of the tokens. So what we do with 2 Prime is an effort by Alexander Bloom and myself as partners. Alex, some of your listeners may remember Alex with the days of Atomic Capital. He was the CEO of Atomic, the leader in the STO space. And I was an investor in Alex. He did this very innovative $100 million deal with Agenix, a medical company. And what we found out was that there's no liquidity. Long story short, when he closed Atomic, I said, Alex, come help me with this new concept that I have. And Alex is the COO. What is 2 Prime? 2 Prime is a financial management company. We market a token and we release it into the exchanges with a proprietary market-making mechanism, token release mechanism we call the continuous token offering. See, the problem with ICOs was not the crowdfunding. The crowdfunding was phenomenal. And the fact that investors, I'm an LP in funds. As you know, LPs are locked up. The fact that as an early investor, I can be fully liquid on a token exchange is a killer application. And part of the reasons why ICOs became such a phenomenon. And that's a killer app. Where we failed was in capital allocation. And if you look at how private equity allocates capital to early stage companies, well, they don't even touch the FF, friend and family stage. VCs are not in the business of growing these little seedlings. They're in the business of growing the seedlings that have taken root and become little trees and growing them. But the way they do that is you go friends and family, seed, Series A, Series B. And at each stage of the game, the numbers get bigger. In fact, let's not go down that rabbit hole, but some argue that with WeWork and all of that, the VCs have gotten a little gluttony themselves and a little greed themselves that a private equity ramp up. But the case remained that it is a more optimized system because we kind of de-risk along the way. The problem with the ICO was the I part, the initial part. People allocated large sums of crypto funds to basically unknown and unproven friends and family stage concepts. And that resulted in a massive case of capital misallocation. So what we're trying to do is introduce this continuous token offering release mechanism where we offer a fraction of the treasury up front and we invest in a certain thesis. The first product that we're marketing is targeting at the blockchain ecosystem. And I'll just take 20 seconds to walk you through that I'm glad to talk about the token release mechanism, which is close to the EOS and Block 1 dynamic. We allocate the funds to the blockchain ecosystem. Every money we raise does not go to 2 Prime, which is the financial manager. It goes to a foundation that invests in the crypto ecosystem. So you can think of our token as a meta token, meaning almost like an index fund, even though it's not an index fund. It's just a token that represents many other tokens. Also, DeFi staking is in there as well as fund of funds. So we're looking for partners that know what they're doing, that have a good reputation that we can allocate funds to. And what we do with this token is we go and talk to institutionals on the one hand. In the United States, we have a Reg D 506C SPV that we market, meaning accredited investors only. And we position it as a way to get exposure to the Bitcoin ecosystem in the way that is diversified and basically doesn't suck and has an SPV, which they know how to deal with instead of tokens. And on the flip side, in about a month, we're going to list the token on Liquid, the exchange out of Japan.
I like Liquid. They're good people there, actually. I'm a big fan of them. Yeah, they're great people.
Yes, us too. And, we've done the tour of the bigger exchanges, and everybody was sort of, no, you want to do IEO, buy the IEO. And it's all pump and dump, and it's not for us. I mean, I realize that it's still a thing a little bit. But I think, what's beyond the ICO, what's beyond the IEO, certainly not the STO. The STO is on a different orbit, I think. But in the crowdfunding thing, we think the CTO, the continuous token offering, is a formula that we want to see succeed and that we're gonna market. So we're going with Liquid. We've chosen Liquid. Why? Because they're actually small, clean, and regulated, and that's a good thing. Yeah.
What does so if Bitcoin were to follow the same course of, the early days of the internet, and what does that look like? What does that look like 10 years from now? If we follow the same course? And this is a question that I've actually never asked. Were there any competing internets with the one, that's a bad question. Were there any competing?
It's not a bad question at all.
Okay. Were there any, you understand what I'm trying to ask, because I don't want to use the term internet incorrectly.
I don't want to name names because it's a small industry, and I'm not here to make friends, but I'm not here to make enemies either. There was this famous, very visible, let's just say VC on stage. And he told everybody, imagine if we put a token mechanism to monetize and do, rent extraction on the HTTP, TCP/IP layers of the internet. And he seemed very convinced by his own argument that the greed, he is a VC, so I get it, it's stuck in his book. And as an open source developer, I was insulted on many layers, but beyond the insult, which is a personal thing, I was thinking through it and go like, he doesn't get it. That, again, people got around the table and laid down their petty competition because they understood from a game theoretic standpoint that if everybody was pushing their own standard, nobody was going to go anywhere. And the only way we all got together is by collaborating on a base layer of protocols. I think, so to answer your question, yes, there was a lot of people that tried to make the internet proprietary. And what we learned is that the symbiosis of collaboration via open source is what really made the internet. I think the same thing is going on right now. Can we look at how vibrant a developer community is as a metric of whether or not that token or coin or blockchain will be successful? Well, if this was open source internet days, I'd tell you that's the only metric. In the case of Bitcoin, I know that it's in the case of blockchain in general, not Bitcoin, excuse me. I know that it's a metric, but I think it has more to do with network effects, adoption, which is not necessarily about the code. And if we believe our thesis that in fact the Bitcoin blockchain ecosystem is not about tech, but it's about the financial applications, then we should measure the success of a blockchain by the liquidity that it has in the exchanges.
Oh.
Meaning the network of people that are actually dealing with this token.
Because people put their money where their mouths are.
People, look, my father was an executive with Procter & Gamble, the marketing company. And then I was trained in the dark arts of Jedi marketing very early on. Here's a little bit of charm. And I know you know this because...
Hold on, we're going to cut to our sponsor now. No, I'm just joking. Tell us the secret.
You know the secret. It's Chomsky. It's linguistics. The brain is equipped to associate about 5 individual names per category. So take anybody out there that is not an expert and tell them, hey, in the soda category, who's there? And they'll tell you Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, whatever. In the case of crypto, they'll tell you Bitcoin, Ether, and pick your favorite third. If you're an expert, you can go up to 7. Where I'm going with that is that you have 7 names usually that are going to bubble in your consciousness, in your memory, as a matter of fact. We're talking biological hardware here, a Chomsky theory of linguistics, that you're going to hold and entertain per category about 6 or 7 if you're in the space, which is why most of the Gartners of the world sell you a new category. If you can't break through in the existing categories, let's manufacture a category for you and we'll put you on the leader quadrant there. By the way, our category is the continuous token offering. and the examples we have right there over there is EOS, XRP, and very soon the FF with 2 prime. Those are the top 3.
It seems like the continuous token offering is a popular model because it continues to guarantee a somewhat of a fair distribution, because one of the biggest arguments of like the ICO, or kind of the model of doing a crowd sale, or letting some people pre-mine, is that without fair distribution, your blockchain is doomed to fail, because more than me even that half of the battle is socioeconomics, is how sociology, how we act and react and use and spend and control and hold and feel about money and value, and that's kind of like half the battle with all these blockchains. So by doing the continuous token offering, it prevents, from what I understand, it prevents a smaller group of wealthier entities or people from controlling the distribution, or a super large amount of any token, therefore not being able to control the the protocol itself. And yes, everyone has a price, but when you have the price of the value of controlling a valuable blockchain is almost priceless. Therefore, I don't like the argument when people tell me, okay, yeah, distribution wasn't fair, but if shit hits the fan, eventually these token holders have a price and they'll buy and they'll sell it and the distribution will be more fair. I don't know, like that's like a cop out. That's a cop out. I don't like that answer. So with the continuous token offering, it almost like guarantees distribution to continuously go on, and therefore it prevents hoarding early, right? And it also prevents the ability for very few entities to control all of the tokens. That's how I see it. And I kind of like that.
I agree with that assessment, even though we're in the early days and we have, 2 examples today that have been successful, EOS and XRP, but that have raised billions of dollars. EOS is a token that resulted in a fund. People joke and ask us, are you a tokenized fund? And we go, no, we're a token fundized. Namely, EOS raised on the premise of technology and dApps, but ended up in block 1, if you structurally look at what happened. XRP and Ripple is even a more interesting example, because all the tokens and treasury go to the equity. So basically, which is why some of the XRP executives were briefly, if for an hour, the wealthiest men on earth during the boom, because they own the token. To your point, the fact that a lot of early people, in the ICO with a large discount and large block allocation in the private sales, that ended up being self-defeating. Why? Because all of a sudden you have a whale that controls the supply, pumps the price, and then dumps it.
Exactly.
And so it's self-defeating because you don't have a network of people neither using nor hodling. So all the altcoins have been, a handful of players in the cap table, so to speak, that eventually dump. I think, to your point, it's not the number of developers in the CVS. Again, I was CVS, meaning the control version software system. I was a software developer. I was one of the pioneers of the open source movement. We measured ourselves by the number of commits and committers. I think this is irrelevant for the crypto space right now. Yes, there's a lot of tech being developed. Yes, some of it will be relevant, but we personally focus on the financial application. Therefore, what's important is the network of people who are dealing in your token, the network of people who are aware of your product and are going to be on the demand side. And so you have to think more about psychology. And I think it's very close to what you do professionally, is you are putting those words out there and people listen to you to say, okay, what are the trends, etc. And the network is really this awareness of a particular brand. And yes, if we have a continuous token offering, then those who come early with a small allocation who take the risk early, just like friends and family, just like seed rounds and just like Series A, own a small portion, but get the rewards if the thing goes on. And just like SoftBank, comes later and takes very large chunks with a lot of money, I think the same thing could happen here. So instead of just $50 million and everybody takes off and goes to the Bahamas, we could end up with several billions of dollars raised with real life applications here.
I want to continue talking to you about that subject, but a burning question I had to completely change topics for a second, I wanted to ask you earlier, is you studied and you did a lot of research with quantum mechanics, and a lot of people have the biggest fear, and I'm going to ask, but the biggest fear about Bitcoin is the coming of quantum computing and how that would affect the mining space. Satoshi almost foresaw that and said that, and he built into the system the difficulty adjustment and even built into an emergency difficulty adjustment. Do you think the difficulty adjustment mechanisms built into Bitcoin is enough of a protection against oncoming quantum computing and be able to mine faster, but also solve, basically be able to prime numbers faster than anyone else?
It's a great question, and I'm going to take a little bit of time and answer it in two parts, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please. Thank you. So far, you've given me the best answer because you're thinking about it.
The first thing that puzzled me in 2011 when I read Satoshi's paper was the nonsense. And to this day, I call it the nonsense of the nonsense. This is this adjustable difficulty you refer to, the leading zeros.
Really?
And
okay.
In hindsight, I understand why. It's because the only way he could think back then, and he wasn't wrong, it came to pass, it came to be, it worked. The only way he could think of securing the network was making sure that there was such a price, an energetic price, a thermodynamic price to pay, that for somebody to hack the system will require enormous resources beyond the reach of most people. And he succeeded in that. And, I know a lot of people either dismiss or harp on the fact that we consume 3% of the Earth's energetic output to secure a chain that has very little usage for payment or the banking system, etc. But the proof point is here. I think proof of work is historically a gem. It's historically one of those star technologies. It's also one of those that maybe we will move past soon enough, either through regulation, just like China that says, look, you were diverted too many resources to something that has only financial value, meaning miners making money, and diverting resources from the real economy. Or the chain gets hacked somehow, and then we have to go to new algorithms of trust and security, which are not so energy intensive. Personally, I don't know, and the guys just as well as I do that are working on the new chains. I'm very interested as to what's going on in the true peer-to-peer system, because if you think about the promise of Bitcoin, in fact, the tagline of Bitcoin was peer-to-peer open source money. Network topology where it's peers, everybody at the same level. Decentralized, beyond decentralized, a distributed system. The reality of Bitcoin is unfortunately way short of that. We're actually a fairly centralized system, as you know. The miners are centralized around the cheap power sources. The developers are centralized around the sources of funding. And funding is centralized around the whales in Silicon Valley. So in practice, we like to bang on the banking system for being centralized, but that's also a linguistic act. The banking system is actually highly decentralized. That's one of the hard truths we like to put out, whereas the Bitcoin system is highly centralized, probably due to the proof of work algorithms.
It's not blockchain technology. Rather, I believe proof of work will one day be seen as one of the most important breakthroughs in human technology. I mean, that's my belief.
I think it's very possible. And it also may be one day seen as the fax machine to the internet.
Wow, that's a good point.
I don't know. I just don't know. But I don't see us consuming 10% of the Earth resources just in good conscience, in an era of millenniums concerned with
But you need to, though. I mean, you understand physics better than I do. So convince me that I'm wrong. I feel like the basic, I took like physics 101. So please forgive me here if I'm like misquoting or misunderstanding certain properties or laws. But some of the most, the basic law of physics is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred. And so when you have something like proof of work, from what I see is proof of work is that transfer of energy. So it's not resources that are being wasted. Like you don't see hospitals being, electricity being diverted from hospitals to mine for Bitcoin. But what you are seeing is without Bitcoin, without proof of work, environmentalists would not have anyone on their side pushing for more efficient and better forms of energy. And what I mean by that is, look who are the ones building the hydroelectric dams in China. It's the Bitcoin miners. And all the extra electricity is going towards towns and cities. It wasn't the government building those, right? So you have, like free market economists will cite this as a perfect example of infrastructure being built by the people who need that infrastructure. So I really don't see proof of work. And this is honestly, this is the topic that I get the most flack at. I'm scared of like the Green Party coming and like, knocking on my door tomorrow. But honestly, I don't see, I think climate change is a real thing, but I don't see how proof of work is a waste of energy. And to the complete opposite of that, I don't see how proof of stake and all the other, consensus algos that are largely based on proof of stake, I don't see how proof of stake actually can exist and it can actually be sustainable, not just as an economic model, but scientifically, following the laws of physics. I don't see how proof of stake can actually be sustainable long term.
I don't really have a dog in that fight. So I'm not gonna sit here and argue with your listeners or you for hours, because I don't really care. On pure philosophical and intellectual grounds, I'll point a few things out, though. I agree with you. Proof of stake is even worse because it compounds the head holder. So let's not even go there. I've heard for many years the argument that, we are transmuting this energy into a symbol, but the energy is lost for sure. The energy is spent. We have a symbol that has a market value. And so it's not entirely lost because we have created a financial symbol, but its real physical economic value is gone, wasted. It has a true market value as long as it's sustainable, but it has no intrinsic value. This is just a fact. When people say I've stored the value of the coin in the blockchain, it's a profound misunderstanding of several concepts, including sunk cost in economic terms. The cost of miners is gone. It works because the value of the coin is sustained in the markets. But if the value of the coin were going to zero tomorrow, pray tell me how you're going to recoup. You don't have a house that is built. You don't have a real economic.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And so I'm not partisan there, but on strict. In any case, I think you're entirely right about the excess capacity in the dams. I actually started thinking about the 2 prime thing in the context of financing smart cities. I'm an investor in IoT, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to divert too much. And then I took a long detour through native tribes of Alaska. Don't ask. It was very interesting. Hello, Jack, if you're listening to this. And there we were talking to the real governor of Alaska. And the problem they have is it's literally, it's too big a territory. And they want to do geothermal, but they don't know how to build the power lines. The economic problem is the power lines, several millions of dollars per mile. So it's not economically feasible.
How can our listeners follow you and your projects?
So we have a website, tuprime.io. You're going to hear a lot about us because my goal here, I retired 15 years ago after selling my company to Red Hat. And I went back to physics, music, occult religion and open source, really, and my own family.
I grew up in a cult religion.
Is that right?
Yeah.
We'll have to discuss that one.
That could be Untold Stories of Cult Religions.
Yeah, fascinating what's going on.
I didn't leave until a few years ago.
Is that right?
I was excommunicated completely. Yeah.
From which cult, if you don't mind?
Well, we'll talk about it offline.
Sure, no problem. I understand.
It's a long story. Super long story.
I became a hermit, basically.
Wow.
And I went back to physics, and I went back to music. I discovered religion through music, the OTO cults, etc. Opus Dei in Spain. And I'm telling you all this because, I took a detour. So, sorry. I agree with you that building geothermal plants, hydrodynamic plants, to do something as futile as waste a lot of CPU to compute hashes that no one really needs to secure the blockchain actually may result on a net positive in the end because we have real economic infrastructure now. And this is better than nothing.
Dr. Marc Fleury, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
We haven't talked about quantum another time.
I know. That's for part 2. I need to leave our listeners hanging on this, but there are so many different topics now that I want to talk to you about. So I'm going to book you for a part 2. I'm super excited. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. New episodes of Untold Stories are released every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. EST on untoldstories.com, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Untold Stories is produced by Jason Yanowitz, Michael Ippolito, Reed Hannaford, and Riley Silbert of Blockworks Group. Our account executives are Gina DeFelice and Julie Muroff. Our content is written by Kathy Zolo, Ronnie Tishner, and Scott Offord. Special thanks to Wayne Dallaire from Jump Dog Audio Productions. And of course, I'm your host, Charlie Shrem. You can follow me on Twitter at Charlie Shrem to continue the conversation. Send me some messages, feedback, or anything you want to say. And remember, please give some love to my sponsors, and I'll see you next week. Remember, strength in numbers and information is power.